Have you ever had those moments growing up as a child when you just wanted to let your parents know that you love them by simply doing what they knew, what you knew they wanted you to do? For instance, maybe it was like cleaning your room, right? You just went in and you started cleaning your room because you knew that you were supposed to clean your room, that it was part of an expectation that your parents maybe had on you. Or maybe it was making good grades or just being a good kid, whatever it was, right? You wanted to do something for them, or you wanted to show them by obeying them that you loved them, right? That's what John is talking about here in 1 John chapter 2, verses 3 through 6. He's letting us know, and he's laying a foundation for how it is that we can know that we know Jesus Christ. And he tells us three things. He tells us that knowing Christ leads to a loving obedience to Christ. You see, there's a big difference between knowing Jesus and knowing about Jesus, right? A lot of people know about Jesus. They know about his life. They know the life he lived. They know his teachings. They know all of this stuff about Jesus, but they don't really know Jesus. And we can read examples in the Bible of this. I believe Judas was one of those. Judas knew a lot about Christ. He lived with Christ. He walked with Christ. But in the end, I don't know if he really knew Jesus Christ or not. His actions showed otherwise. His obedience showed otherwise, right? A lot of unbelieving scholars today know a lot about Christ, but they don't know Christ. Even the demons knew about Jesus Christ, but they didn't know Jesus because they didn't obey Jesus. And that's what John is telling us here in 1 John chapter 2, verses 3 through 6. He tells us that knowing Jesus Christ leads to this loving obedience. See, to know God is to love God, and to love God is to obey God. I love what Matt Carter said about this. He said there's a direct connection between a person's love for Jesus and that person's obedience to him. That's what he's talking about. See, you will know that you know Jesus Christ if you keep his commands. That word keeping that John uses here is literally the word guarding. We guard God's commands on our hearts. We keep it on our hearts and we protect it like it's a precious treasure to us. See, if we don't guard or we don't keep his commands, John says that we are a liar, right? We're claiming to be something we're not. We're claiming to have something that we don't. For example, if I was to say that I had a Lamborghini and I drove a Lamborghini all the time, right, you wouldn't know if I really had one unless you saw me driving it. You saw me pulling up to the grocery store in it. You saw me pulling up to church in it. You saw me going to the gym in it. Whatever it is, right? You saw me driving it on a regular basis. Then you would know that I actually had a Lamborghini, right? But I can say I have a Lamborghini all day long out in my garage, but until you see me driving it, right, you don't know if I really have one or not. The same is true in our relationship with Jesus Christ. I can claim all day long that I know Jesus Christ, but until I actually live out his commands and I lovingly obey them, only then will you know that I know Jesus Christ. If I follow and live a life of loving obedience to him. To know Christ is to love Christ, and to love Christ is to obey Christ. In verse 5, John tells us that we can know that we know Christ, right, if we lovingly obey him. See, obedience is this direct result of knowing Jesus Christ, of knowing and loving him, right? It's experiencing Christ in such a way that it truly changes us from the inside out, right? It transforms us. See, knowing God and his love is actually trusting God and his love. See, if we don't trust God and we don't trust his love, we don't actually believe that he is who he says he is and that what he wants for us is what's best for us. See, knowing and trusting God leads to a life of loving obedience because we truly trust that what God wants of us and what God commands of us is what's actually best for us. That God truly wants the best life for us to live, and he wants us to live that life in loving obedience to him. See, we obey God because we truly believe that God is who he says he is. We obey God because we truly believe that God is love. See, the more that we know Christ, the more that we're going to obey Christ. And the more that we obey Christ, the more we're going to love Christ. And the more that we love Christ, the more we're going to get to know Christ. It's this really cool, continuous cycle that happens as we grow and we mature in our faith and our relationship with Jesus Christ. You know that you know Christ if you lovingly obey him. In verse 6, right, John tells us that knowing Christ means that we're actually living like Christ. See, when God saved us, he didn't save us just to get to heaven, right? He didn't save us just to take us somewhere else. He saved us so that we can live a life here on earth right now abundantly like Christ lived. He saved us so that we can walk as he walked and so we can live as he lived. And we're going to talk more about what that means in detail in a practical way next week. But what all of this boils down to right now and right here, and what John is saying is that our walk has to match our talk. If we're going to say that we follow Jesus Christ, then we better live like we follow Jesus Christ. If we're going to say that we know Christ, right, we better show that we know Christ in the way that we live by lovingly obeying the commands that he has for us, to love God and to love others as we love ourselves. So this week, what I want for you to do is I want you to just keep a journal, right? Whether it's on your phone or whether you have a journal that you already keep, just keep a journal of how you are trying to obey Jesus Christ. See, the beauty in all of this is he's not expecting perfect obedience out of us. He's expecting us to try. He's expecting us to try to do what he has commanded us to do, right? And he gives us the strength and the ability to do it. So what I want you to do is just keep a journal, whether it's on your phone or in a pad journal, right? Keep that journal of obeying him. And keep a journal, a list of maybe how you've fallen short. Just so you can see and can compare, not legalistically, not so you can get down on yourself or anything like that, but just so you can see and live of, all right, maybe I need to do better in these areas, but I'm doing pretty good here. See, we want to follow Christ. And if we want to love Christ, we have to obey Christ.